Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Skelton. I'm the CEO of the Greater Manchester Chamber of Commerce, and I am pleased to be here today to host our virtual roundtable on gaining a better understanding of homelessness in New Hampshire. It's my pleasure to be here on behalf of the Chamber and our business community to engage with some amazing leaders in our community who are working on the issue of homelessness, and to help you and our community gain a better understanding of this complex issue. I think we know at the Chamber that in order for our community to be successful and to grow, our community has to be healthy, and we have to be helping and serving all those who are in need of assistance and help. And that's what today's discussion is really all about, is gaining a better understanding of the services, the initiatives, the organizations that are working to help those in need, answering questions or misconceptions or areas of information that you might be lacking about some of these really critically important issues. We have some great speakers to connect you to, and we're looking forward to the conversation. And today's conversation is just a start. And we encourage you to reach out, share your feedback, your ideas, your additional questions, and how those of us at the Chamber or any of the great organizations participating today can better connect you with the information and ideas that you need to understand and engage with these important community issues. So with that, let's dive in. Okay, to start our program today, we're going to have a panel discussion with three leaders from three very important organizations doing important work in our community. Joining me today is Maria Devlin, who's the president of Families in Transition, Erin Kelly of Waypoint, and Jessica Cantin, the CEO of the YWCA of New Hampshire. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining me. I'd like to start by having each of you just give a bit more introduction of yourself and your organization. Maria, could I start with you, and could you share a little bit about Families in Transition, your role, and the mission of your organization?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having us here, Mike. We are an organization that started about 30 years ago here in New Hampshire, with really the idea that every person has a need to have a home, a stable place to call home. We've expanded that mission over the course of time, and as many people know, we also provide the services at our adult shelter here in Manchester as well. We have locations throughout the state of New Hampshire, so Wolfboro, Concord, Dover, and Manchester. And we really provide evidence-based practices on the root causes of homelessness, and we work with people in all levels of homelessness to help provide some stability in their lives.
Thanks, Maria. Erin, could you share with us a bit more about Waypoint?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm Erin Kelly, and I'm the Director of Youth and Young Adult Homeless Services at Waypoint, which is a private nonprofit organization. And our mission is to empower people of all ages through an array of human services and advocacy. And one of the ways that we do that is providing services for youth and young adults as young as 12 and all the way up to their 25th birthday who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. So we provide services to young people in Manchester. We cover 14 towns on the seacoast, including the Tri-City region of Rochester, Dover, and Somersworth. And we also have programs in Concord and Littleton.
Thank you, Erin. And Jessica, could you share with us a bit more about YWCA of New Hampshire?
Sure. Thank you, Mike, for having, and to the Chamber for having us today. So the YWCA has been in our community for 101 years, actually celebrated our 101st anniversary this year. And we are one of the oldest women's organizations in New Hampshire. But we're more than that in the sense of our housing programs are very specialized to support survivors and their families who've experienced domestic or sexual violence. We operate one of the largest domestic violence safe shelters in the state, and we are a member program of the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. So what that means is that we serve housing and crisis services in the southern New Hampshire region, particularly Greater Manchester. And we have some additional programming that we can provide rental assistance and wraparound services for individuals who are seeking safe housing and more permanent housing in a situation where they need to get out of an abusive relationship or situation.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you all again for being here. We really appreciate it. So let's dive into some questions that I think are all geared towards helping our audience gain a better understanding of homelessness and the various issues surrounding it. And on behalf of the Greater Manchester Chamber hosting this, obviously the city of Manchester is a community where these issues are present and it's often discussed. Each of your organizations is based here. So maybe we could start by talking about Manchester and the biggest hurdles to making progress on these issues in Manchester. And Maria, I wonder if I could start with you. If you could share from Family and Transitions perspective, really the biggest hurdles or challenges you're seeing to making progress and serving those that you're trying to help in Manchester.
Thanks, Mike. As I said earlier, Families in Transition, how we started was really to provide low-income housing for people who needed it. That mission has expanded over time, and we own a variety of properties throughout the state that help people in different times of their lives. And really, that's what we're seeing here in Manchester, throughout the whole state of New Hampshire, quite honestly, is not enough low-income housing for people. We have a really tight market here. People want to move to New Hampshire, which is wonderful, but it does have a negative effect at times on the folks that we're serving who are the lowest income in our communities. So affordable housing is a big piece of this puzzle.
Great, thank you. And Erin, I wonder if you could share from Waypoint's perspective, as you mentioned in your introduction, your role is focused at helping at-risk youth and youth in our community. From that perspective, what are some of the challenges in Manchester that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is that in order to really prevent and end youth and young adult homelessness, we have to have a community-wide strategy that really is a comprehensive response. And it really has to be meeting young people at every spot on the trajectory of homelessness. So prevention services. So for young people that might be couch surfing or kind of moving from place to place, really having services that prevent them from ending up on the street and literally homeless. And for those young people who are on the street and literally homeless, we need to have an immediate response, crisis response for them, like an emergency shelter. And then, as Maria said, some of our young people are experiencing the same barriers. They're working 2 or 3 low-wage jobs, and there's such a disparity between the wages that they're earning and the cost of housing that they really just cannot make ends meet and afford housing in our community. And the low rental stock makes that even more challenging. So being able to support affordable housing and long-term supportive housing for those that need it.
Great, thanks, Erin. And Jessica, I'd like to turn to you now with the same question, looking at the mission of your organization and your focus, what do you see as the biggest challenges and hurdles to making progress in Manchester?
I'm going to have to join Erin and Maria and talk about affordable housing. It's a real tragedy that, we have housing assistance programs here at the YW, but we don't have apartments to match our survivors who are seeking housing. In some cases, we've experienced our survivors being one of 20 or 25 applicants for an apartment. And this not only presents an issue with addressing homelessness, but it also presents a safety issue when you're talking about housing survivors. So definitely affordable housing.
Thank you for that. And I think that is one of the themes that I'm sure we're going to come back to in terms of the intersection between housing and all of these issues. And clearly a focal point for our community to think about long-term solutions. I think another question, overarching question that would be helpful for each of you to chime in on is, from your perspective as experts that are working on these issues every day, what do those of us who don't work on these issues and don't have this level of familiarity need to know to better understand this issue? You know, what are the things that you see and experience that the general public really doesn't have access to, but is what contributes to these being incredibly complex, long-term, difficult challenges to overcome for a community or for a state. So Maria, maybe I could start with you again and just share from your experience, your perspective at Families in Transition. What do people need to know to get a better understanding of homelessness and its related issues?
Thanks, Mike. It's a great question. And the answer really is that homelessness is a complex issue. Every single person is unique. So, I think a lot of the community often believes that everyone who is homeless has a mental health issue or is using substances, and that may or may not be true. We have a number of people who we work with who are homeless. Just as Erin said, they're working a job, but it's a low wage job and they're not making ends meet, and they find a community that they want to live with. And that may be a homeless camp. It may be couch surfing, as Erin said, on their friends' or families' couches for as long as they can. It is extremely complex. And we also know that many of these people have had numerous traumas in their life. There's too many people in our community who are living paycheck to paycheck. They have one trauma that could happen to them where they missed a job because they broke their ankle or something happened, and now they're homeless because it just can be that quick. So it's a complex issue, and every single day, our organization and the organizations before you and many more are working with everyone who wants to seek services. And we want to help them help them become more stable over time.
Erin, same question to you, and building off of Maria's answer, anything you want to add to that? From your perspective, what do we in the general public need to know to gain a better understanding of these issues?
I think the first thing that folks need to know is that there is no youth or young adult who wants to be homeless. I think that it's important to recognize that for young adults, when we're talking about 18, 19, 20-year-olds, many of them have never experienced housing stability. So they have been evicted with their families over time. They've been doubled up in apartments with their families as they've been growing up, where they've been, living with 14 or 15 people in an apartment that might be just 3 or 4 bedrooms. And so they don't really know what housing stability is. And when we interject in their lives and really try to provide services to them, we're trying to help them to see the potential that they have for something different than the environment in which they might have grown up in. And I also think that when we talk about things like mental health issues or substance abuse issues, oftentimes the young adults that we're working with are the youth that are the product of those things. So they've been growing up in environments where they've been exposed to their parent or caregiver's mental health issues that might be untreated or sporadically treated throughout their lives. And same with substance abuse issues. And so many of these young people come to us after experiencing sort of a lifetime of trauma, abuse, neglect, family violence, and are really trying to figure out what it means to transition to adulthood, the same way that our own children or any teenager or young adult struggles during that period of transition into adulthood, except these young people don't have a stable family to necessarily lean back on when something happens, like they overdraw their bank account or they lose their job, and therefore they experience homelessness. And the longer they spend time in homelessness, the longer they're on the street, the more likely that they become part of the chronic homeless population and experience homelessness throughout their lives and as adults. So we really want to intervene with youth and young adults as quickly as possible and get them off the street and be able to provide them with both crisis response and emergency shelter, and also long-term supports that can help them to really figure out what it means to be a stable adult.
Great, thank you, Erin. That's a great answer. Jessica, wondering if I can turn to you now, and what would you like to add here to this conversation about thinking about those folks in the community who are interested and want to know more, but don't live and understand and work in these issues every day? What do they need to know to better understand?
I think what we need to understand is that, just like Erin and Maria were mentioning, is that long-term stress over a life, over a family, could be categorized very simply in like good, bad, and ugly. So good is the everyday stress that most of you and I experience. Bad is maybe a period of stress where you've experienced declining financial health, or you've experienced some sort of trauma in your family. But a lot of the folks that we're working with that fall into this chronic homelessness category are in that ugly stress period of their life. And it compounds. And so just like with our survivors, many of them, like Erin was saying, have experienced this kind of violence or abuse throughout their lifespan. And so they're often also, as Erin was discussing with the youth, disenfranchised. Their abuser probably would not allow them to hold a job, get an education. And so if you build all of those things together, the average person can really begin to understand, if they put it in the context of their own life and maybe their own experiences, how these things can make it really a prime environment for homelessness to grow and thrive in that person's life. And so we as a community can do some things to make sure that impact is minimized.
Great, thank you, Jessica. And I'm going to circle right back to you with another question. We're going to be transitioning to another segment in a moment, but also having the three of you come back for a wrap up and final thoughts and conclusions segment in a little bit. But you mentioned our community and what we can do to better address these issues. And so I'd like to pose three of you kind of a combined question of thinking about what should our long-term goal be around addressing these challenges. But in thinking about that, how can we as a community do that better? Because each of you are representing organizations that live and breathe these issues every day, and supporting those in our community that need assistance. What can those of us in the community do to contribute directly or indirectly to that long-term vision and goal that we're trying to accomplish? So I'm going to flip the order, and Jessica, come to you to kick off on this one.
I think our community can invest in the things that we might not necessarily have a direct, quick impact. We have to be willing to get uncomfortable, or to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that comes with us investing in education, us investing in programs that support children and youth. The YWCA partners with Amoskeag Health and Manchester Police Department on the Adverse Childhood Experiences Response Team. This is a national program that's gained a lot of traction, and it was born in Manchester. And at the core of it is us as a community showing up and letting people know something traumatic happened to you and your family, and we're here as a community. Here are the resources for you. So if we could just change our dialogue and flip the script a little bit from seeing homelessness as a deficit in our community, a black eye in our community, to how can we see those people as individuals, and how can we capitalize on the opportunities to create an environment where we are what we like to call in our field more trauma informed, meaning we're more understanding, we have more hope, we have more validation, we pay more on the upfront, not necessarily in dollars, but in an investment as in human capital.
Thanks, Jessica. Erin, what's your feeling on that question of thinking about our long-term goal and vision, where we want to get as a community, but what do we as a community need to do to be part of that? How do we shift our thinking? How do we change our actions to support that?
Yeah, so the Housing and Urban Development Department has this phrase called rare, brief, and non-reoccurring, which is, I think, our goal in the community. We want homelessness amongst our community to be a rare occurrence, not something that happens frequently, that it is brief, that if somebody does experience homelessness, we have enough services in our community that we can respond quickly, and that episode of homelessness is a short episode of homelessness. And that once somebody is provided services, that there's enough services to help them long-term, that it does not reoccur for them, that they don't relapse back into homelessness. So I think as a community, though, that is really our goal. And when we're talking about youth and young adults and experiencing homelessness and wanting it to be rare, brief, and non-reoccurring, we need our community to invest in things like education, as Jessica was saying, and also to really think about paid apprenticeships in our community. There's a lot of really thriving businesses and awesome companies in our community of Manchester. And our youth and young adults need to be able to see that low wage, entry-level jobs is not all that is possible for them. They really need to be encouraged to build careers and to understand that if they build their employment skills, they could do something much more than anything they've really been exposed to throughout their lives. But that takes our business community really investing in those young people and seeing that when they invest in those young people, they're investing in the future of our community. So I think education and job readiness and employment skills for young people is something that is without a doubt integral in making sure that homelessness does not continue to occur for our youth and young adults in Manchester.
Thanks, Erin. So Maria, to wrap up on this same question, sharing your thoughts about kind of our long-term goal and vision around this issue, and what's the community's role in making that happen, whether it's direct action in supporting organizations like yours or the other organizations that are working in this field, or indirect action in terms of changing our thinking and our perceptions and our words around how we engage on these issues.
Well, I first want to echo everything my colleagues have just said, because they've hit the nail on the head in so many respects. We mentioned, affordable housing and the lack of it. We need landlords, we need business owners, we need everyone to be open to having people who are low income in our community and be a part of our community. And oftentimes we see that is not the case. We see communities turning away from our most vulnerable, and we need to start to open those doors a bit more. It is going to take everyone. It is going to take landlords and developers to rethink their housing market and what they want to do, and to be open to mixed housing opportunities where you have some, market rate rentals as well as low income rentals, and rentals for families and rentals for individuals. So we need to really think about how we grow Manchester moving forward. And when there are opportunities to build in Manchester, what can that look like so that we can bring more of the community together in that way? But I echo everything Jessica and Erin has said. It's going to take everyone. Everyone has a part to play in helping us create a better life for our most vulnerable folks in the city.
Great, thank you, Maria, and thank you all for those great answers and this great start to our discussion. I think we covered a lot of good ground in a short period of time. Certainly more to say and more to touch on, and I'd like to bring you back in a few moments after our next segment to help us kind of wrap up and put a recap on this great conversation. next, I'd like to introduce Schonna Green, who is the Director of Homelessness Initiatives for the City of Manchester, which is a new position in our community. And Schonna recently relocated to the area to serve in this important position. So Schonna, thanks so much for moving up here and joining us in Manchester. We're so pleased to have you as part of our community. And I'm wondering if you could start just by sharing a little bit about yourself and also a little bit about this new position, Director of Homelessness Initiatives in the City of Manchester.
Thanks for having me. My name is Schonna Green, as stated, and I come to you from Florida. I've been in the field of homeless advocacy for over 25 years, and I took the position with the City of Manchester because I felt that I could have impact here and affect change. As it relates to some of the things that I am seeing, I think the organizations are doing a wonderful job, but there's still a lot more to do. I also believe that oftentimes when we talk about homelessness, we tend to just lump it all together. Everybody needs affordable housing. It's not the case. We have to look at what subpopulations we're dealing with. What are their housing needs? We need to put together long-term housing, permanent supportive housing for some of the needs that we are seeing in the homeless arena. And as it relates to affordable housing, we need to put together strategic plans that address 30%, 40%, 50%, and 60% of median income. Those are your bank tellers. Those are your servicers in the stores that are 1 and 2 paychecks away from homelessness. So as it relates to the City of Manchester, and one of the things that we're working on is HOPE. Housing options promote empowerment. Everyone needs a place to call home, and we need to look at all people in all incomes. And that's what we're doing. So we've been able to, through the RFP process that's coming up soon, look at local nonprofits that are willing to expand their capacity in building supportive housing and adding to the available beds here for the city. We're also encouraging nonprofits, for-profits, faith-based initiatives, and landlords to get involved, because through collaboration and through partnership and through community, we can address the biggest needs. The ability is here. It's just a matter of bringing it all together and looking at what are the first steps. So today, we all realize the situation that happened with another encampment closing. That's where the priority has to start. We have to do better. We have to place homeless that are in the woods in housing, and then start to transition them into permanency. Simultaneously, we have to look at the young kids that are working low-income jobs and adults that are working low-income jobs, and look at how best to provide housing that they too qualify for. And one of the things that Maria said, which I think is very, very important, is when we're looking at mixed-use housing, make sure we're mixing all the incomes. Give people something to aspire to so that they too can be better. And as it relates to the community, how businesses can get involved is by nonprofits putting together programs in which their expertise can be utilized. I believe this is the best approach. And I believe when we educate our community and they realize that it too can be them, we change the perception. Anybody can have a circumstantial situation in which they are rendered homeless today. So that's why I'm here. And I'm learning about all the new organizations that are here, and learning about the services that they provide, and looking at the gaps that we have and trying to help.
Great, thanks, Schonna. I think that's a really good introduction to the issues that you're grappling with in this new role. And I do think it's important to note and to highlight for those viewing today's program that how important it is and notable it is that the city has created this position to really centralize its role in participating in addressing homelessness and the related challenges for our community, and how that brings you together with all of the great nonprofits that are doing essential, important work in our community. I'm wondering if I could pose to you a similar question that I did to our panel earlier, in terms of, and you touched on this just a moment ago, of thinking about the community's role, but thinking about the long-term vision of where we need to go as a community, and the solutions that you hope that we can put in place through the city and your other partnerships to address homelessness, and the community's role in that, whether it's directly through supporting nonprofits or businesses and developers creating more housing, but also how we as citizens can participate in that by understanding homelessness better, by stopping misconceptions or ending stereotypes about this issue, and our role in being part of that side of the equation as well. Do you have some thoughts to share on that piece?
Well, I believe that when we look at humanity on a whole, it's extremely important to realize that we all contribute to its success and or its failure. So it's my goal to create opportunities in which local businesses and churches and anyone can get involved, because their opinion matters, and we need different levels of expertise at the table. This is not something that's going to go away today or tomorrow. This is not something that all the nonprofits can handle. It's a continuum, because we're going to need housing, and we're going to need support services, and we're going to have different issues that we would need to address the same exact way. So with some of the programs that we're looking at right now, there are going to be volunteer opportunities in which people can come out and have an impact in their community in helping not just the homeless, but the low income and indirectly our city.
Great, thank you. And I think one of the most important things I heard through your comments over the past couple of minutes is the importance of us having hope, and that, and I think Jessica, Erin, and Maria all raised this in their comments as well, that part of the role we as community members can play is taking a hopeful, optimistic view of these issues and looking for ways that we can contribute positively, rather than having a cynical or negative view that really doesn't move us closer to a better outcome for everyone. So Schonna, with that, what I'd like to do is transition and bring you in with Jessica, Erin, and Maria, and we can start to wrap up a little bit about today's session and highlight some takeaways. So I guess one of the first questions I'd like to pose to all of you, and I'll go to each of you to chime in on this, is we'd like to focus on takeaways. And I have two kind of takeaway questions that I want to pose to you all. And the theme of today's gathering was gaining a better understanding of homelessness in New Hampshire, and a lot of our conversation is focused on Manchester, given where all of our organizations are based. It sounded like all of you brought up affordable housing as a critical piece of the puzzle here, perhaps the most critical piece of the puzzle, to tangibly make progress on this issue in the long term. I think that came up multiple times in different ways. So Maria, maybe I could start with you, given that Families in Transition is actively engaged in developing housing options and bringing them to the community. We could spend a lot more time exploring that element, but again, I think it'd be helpful for us to reemphasize for our audience, since it came up, how critical is that affordable housing, supportive housing piece of the puzzle here to solution to this issue?
I think my panelists would agree that that is one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle. Families in Transition is in the business of taking properties and rehabbing them for this exact purpose. So we currently have a project that should be taking place sometimes toward the end of this year. It's on Union Street. It's a building that we're going to turn into 11 units for individuals. It's a part of the success that we have had over many, many years. All of our buildings that we own have anywhere between 11 and 30 units. And all the people that we work with have been chronically homeless at some point in their lifetime for a long period of time. And we provide the supportive services for those individuals and or families, which as Schonna mentioned, and Erin and Jessica has mentioned, the supportive services piece is an important part of that. I think what I also want to say from just an organizational standpoint is, we can continue to develop buildings, but from an operational standpoint, it becomes much more of a challenge to ensure that we have the operating funds to maintain those buildings, to continue to pay our staff, to do the important work that they're doing. So it's much more than just taking a building and rehabbing it and providing some services. It is an expensive adventure. And I think that's where the community really comes into play. We have a very generous community here in Manchester and the state of New Hampshire that has helped us, but it's certainly that piece of the pie. Is really important to understand that if we take on a building, we own that building for its lifetime. And we're responsible for the people who reside in it. So it's not just a one-time deal. This is a long-term business venture that the community will have for forever.
Thank you, Maria. And so I'd like to turn to Erin and Jessica and Schonna for you each to chime in on this specific conversation, since housing options, affordable housing has been such a through line of our conversation today. And thinking of our viewers who are not regularly engaged in these conversations, like myself, not being an expert, that when we talk about housing in this conversation, that can mean many things. There's affordable housing, there's transitional housing, there's emergency housing, there's shelters. So it's really what we're talking about here is the community having an appropriate balance of all these options that we need to serve the populations that are at risk or at need. So Erin, maybe I could turn to you first and just quickly, anything you want to add to this specific conversation before we move to our wrap up.
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head with that. I think that when we're thinking about homelessness and we're thinking about the ways that we need to move towards solving the issue of homelessness, we can't just have a one size kind of fits all model. There has to be an array of responses to the issue of homelessness. And that applies to youth and young adults as well. We've been providing services to youth experiencing homelessness in Manchester since the early 70s. And, the problem continues to grow because there isn't that array of services. We have transitional living programs, and when a young person comes to the end of their time in our transitional living programs, it's really difficult to transition them out to independent housing because they cannot afford it in our community. So being able to have an entire trajectory where somebody can come into an emergency shelter and then attempt to stay at a transitional living program, and then, affordable housing or long-term supportive housing, and that they can enter that system at whatever place is the most appropriate for them at the time, and that they have a multitude of options and can kind of move within those options if necessary. So I think, that's one of the things that we're trying to do at Waypoint is kind of build out that continuum of services for youth and young adults specifically. So in addition to our drop-in center that we've had for quite some time in Manchester and our transitional living programs, we are working right now to open a youth and young adult emergency shelter so that young people ages 18 to 25 can have an emergency place where they can lay their head at night and get services that are age appropriate and developmentally appropriate for that age group of young people and that transition to adulthood. And we are also adding some permanent housing units to that project as well, in order to have kind of those permanent housing options that are available to this population too. So just as Maria was saying, continuing to kind of build that continuum, but also hoping that the community sees it as their role and responsibility to help build those options out as well, because the nonprofits in our community don't have the ability to lift all of the projects it's going to take to be able to really solve the issue of homelessness in Manchester.
Thanks, Erin. Jessica, I want to include you in this conversation that we've been having before we move to our final wrap up. This housing as kind of a foundational solution and having all of these appropriate options. What would you like to add to what we've covered so far in this space?
I think it's, as Erin and Maria and Schonna were mentioning, it's going to take innovation and not a one-size-fits-all situation. So what we've done is really try to build with our limited resources a housing program that really meets the needs of all survivors. Domestic violence-related homicides are particularly high in New Hampshire. So we do need safe shelter for domestic violence victims fleeing an unsafe situations. Not pleasant to think about, but we do need it. And so it's important that we keep that shelter in place, but we're exploring opportunities with other partners in the community that are also interested in this space. So maybe potentially looking at cooperative housing models, either through manufactured housing or multifamily units. In some cases, and I know we want to retain citizens in Manchester, but we're also working with survivors who may have a better support system in another part of the country and providing the support that they need to get there. That's obviously a very unique situation, but it's not a one size fits all measure. And I think we're going to have to think outside of the box and creatively if we're going to be able to sustain any of our plans long term.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. So Schonna, I'd like to turn to you to chime in on this, but also to start kind of our wrap up of today's conversation. And working off of this last question we've been discussing, and Schonna, I know you spoke about extensively about housing options, so it's a good place to bring you in. What do you think, based on today's conversation about gaining a better understanding of homelessness in New Hampshire and in Manchester, if there was just one takeaway that you would hope that folks watching today would take from this conversation in terms of how they can better understand this issue going forward, what would that be?
Because there's so many. But in an effort to change the public's perception of homelessness, unhoused, lack of affordable housing, and rendered homeless, it can be you. It can be you. I've seen it in many states. All it took was a bad storm. All it took was a lost job. I think that we have to embrace this a different way with compassion. And I also believe in what the city of Manchester is doing, which is reaching out to most nonprofits and as it relates to development and bringing forth the much needed housing, such as Maria's program and Erin's program. And they're looking at other organizations to bring forth more affordable housing to the city. But I think we all need to be compassionate, and be part of the process that helps us to better develop our city, one in which we can all be proud of. But it takes time. Thank you.
Thank you, Schonna. Jessica, I want to go to you next on this discussion. And what do you think in terms of thinking about the folks watching at home who, again, as we've talked about today, are not regularly engaging on these issues, may have encountered misinformation or incorrect stereotypes or misperceptions about this issue? What do you hope they take away from our conversation today in terms of gaining a better understanding?
I hope that they take away, just as Schonna mentioned, that it's not an us or them situation. It could happen to us, it could happen to anyone in our family, and it really is going to take us embracing every member of our community, even the ones that are struggling. And I know that sounds a little squishy, but it's at the end of the day, that's what this all really comes down to, is us providing an opportunity for everyone to thrive, whatever that looks like for them.
Erin, I'll go over to you. We covered a lot of ground today and a lot of different topics, but again, from that, is there something that stands out, or is it building on what Schonna and Jessica have talked about in terms of what should be that takeaway we need to start the process of getting a better understanding?
I think one of the things that I would love for people to really embrace is the fact that homelessness is not an issue. Homelessness are people, right? So to really look at this from a human perspective and really shed some humanity on this issue. And when we are walking in our community and we see somebody who we think might be experiencing homelessness, look at them, say hello, acknowledge that they are a human being in our community, because they deserve to feel like they are part of Manchester. And I think the other thing I would like to say is that people don't want to be homeless. If people right now are spending the night on the street, it is because the right housing opportunity hasn't presented itself to them yet. And we have to continue working to develop all of those opportunities so that we get to the place where at some point, every person who's experiencing homelessness in our community says yes.
Thanks, Erin. Maria, turning to you to wrap up and to have the final word on this question. What's your take? What's your feeling from all of the great things we've been able to touch on that hopefully have helped our audience gain a better understanding? What's that one takeaway or overarching message you hope that resonates with everyone, that sticks with them from today?
I have learned so much from all our panelists today. It's amazing to me how much I learn every single day here at this organization and from all the nonprofits and the people around me. I think, one word that always comes to mind when talking about people who are experiencing homelessness is acceptance. And as Erin just said, we need to accept the fact that we have people who are living in very, very challenging positions right now, in places where we would not want to see our families living. And as Erin said, we use the term homelessness. It's kind of like a category, but these are people. These are our mothers, our fathers, our brothers, sisters, cousins. And quite honestly, I've had family members who have been homeless. My mother and brother lived under a bridge in a car for longer than I would like to admit. They had a lot of pride and they didn't want to let anyone know what was happening to them. And I didn't even know about it. And that's what the face of homelessness looks like. And every single person has their own story, as Erin has said, and every single person has the right and should have the opportunity to find a place that they can call home.
Thank you, Maria. And thank you all for the great conversation today. I think, in a relatively short period of time, we've covered an awful lot of ground, touched on a lot of important issues, and we could have gone much longer. And there's so much more to learn and so much more to say. So our message to those joining us today who have had a chance to view this is share your feedback, share your questions. What can we add to this? And also please share this. If you viewed this video today, this virtual roundtable today, send it to a colleague, send it to a friend, send it to a family member in our community who you think would find it interesting and benefit from it. Having these conversations and listening to other perspectives, I think we've heard today, is a really important way we can all play a role in doing better as a community and playing a better role. So on behalf of the Chamber and our community, I want to thank Erin and Jessica and Schonna and Maria for being here today and participating in all that you're doing and for all that your organizations are doing. Manchester and our state are very fortunate to have you doing the important work that you're doing. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to continuing the conversation soon. Have a great day.